Welcome to WeAreSC. This is Erik McKinney, joined by Greg Katz. Greg, it's early signing day, and it's an interesting one. It comes 2 days before the Pac-12 championship game. It is a lot of stuff, a lot of balls in the air with the USC staff. They were able to sign a class that they announced 20 new additions on this first day. That includes 19 high school signees and one transfer that we learned about a few days ago coming over from Alabama. Your thoughts just got on the class overall and how USC did today in a class that's ranked in the comfortably in the top 20, up in the top 15 nationally.
I think they're around 13 or 14 when you give the fact that some of the elite players of Southern California still are uncommitted. At least that's what we're told. But I think that you get Corey Foreman, Rajon Davis, and the defensive back from Loyola,
Yeah,
Sierra Wright. I think if they did that, they could crack the top 10, maybe 9. It's not going to be an elite class, and I'll be honest with you. Until they start getting some 4-star offensive linemen, they're really never going to be able to crack that top 5 because I think it's so nationally known what they need and what they're not getting. And I'm not saying it's anybody's fault; it's just what it is. But overall, I don't see how you can not like what you're seeing. But they do need those 3 guys to come on board. If they do, then I think they have a really, really good class.
let's start at the quarterback spot. That was kind of the position of intrigue for this year. USC, they lose Bryce Young in the 2020 class. He signs with Alabama, and they're not able to kind of scramble and fill that gap. So Keaton Slovis comes in 2019. He takes over the starting spot. You're already kind of hear the clock ticking to where he is out and off to the NFL, and there is no one behind him. So getting 2 quarterbacks in this class was important for a long time. It looked like Miller Moss and Jake Garcia. Jake Garcia backs out when USC goes all in on Jackson Dart, and USC gets the good news today. Dart does sign with USC. They're able to finish that off and bring in those 2 guys. Your thoughts on USC, just how the quarterback recruiting went overall, and then being able to bring in kind of the 2 guys that they really focused on.
Well, I thought it was going to be a good recruiting class for quarterbacks when they had Miller Moss and Jake Garcia. I was never sold on Jake Garcia. I don't think being at 5 places is although I was watching ESPN and they were talking about how you have to really look at each place and why he left. And I went, okay, fine, whatever. But that being said, I really, really like Jackson Dart. I when I looked at him again on film today, and he looked like Sam Darnold, but then a little bit today, he kind of reminded me of Carson Palmer, the way he stood up in the pocket and threw the ball downfield. Either way, I think he's tremendous. This is not to take anything away from Miller Moss, because I think he's a great prospect. I do think, however, and I'll say this on the record, I think if Jackson Dart would played in LA, he would have been the number 1 quarterback prospect. He's just too too much of a dual threat athlete, and what he can do is really quite amazing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know there's a lot of kind of talk about, both these guys can't stay at USC for their whole careers, and one of them's going to transfer. I mean, quarterbacks transfer. That's kind of how things go now. When you look back at it, a huge majority of the top quarterbacks from the last 4 or 5 years, they don't end up where they sign. But if you're USC, you want as many guys in there. You want as many sort of balls in the ping pong lottery that you can get, so that when you make your choice, you have the most options, and you hope you pick the right guy. And that battle between Jackson Dart and Miller Moss, 2 of the early enrollees that are going to be there in the spring, that's going to be absolutely fascinating to watch. Their games are quite a bit different. Jackson Dart has that dual threat. Miller Moss, more of a pocket guy, but he's very comfortable moving around in the pocket, and a little bit like Keaton Slovis, where he's not going to take off and burn you for big chunks of yards, but he can keep a play alive with his eyes downfield and make a throw. I wouldn't discount Miller Moss at all. I think he's a very good fit in this offense. It was clear though that the USC coaches were enamored with Jackson Dart, really went after him hard, and they've got two good ones at that position. And then because you brought up the offensive line, I think we'll go there a little bit. So this is two classes now, three offensive linemen in this class. That adds to six offensive linemen in the 2020 class. I think kind of your point, these are not the big kind of 4-star, 5-star guys. You had maybe two elite guys out in the West region in Kingsley Suamataia and then Bram Walden, both of them going to Oregon. And that's kind of a theme that we've seen the last few years. Hey, here's a top USC target. Oh, by the way, he's going to Oregon. And overall, this class, so much better than what USC was able to do in 2020. But it's some of the same things. I like what they did with the offensive line. I think there's a few pieces there, but you're still missing the Austin Jackson, the Elijah Vera Tucker. I mean, the difference makers that make you USC, that set you apart. And I think that's maybe what we're both seeing on the offensive line.
Absolutely. And, if you don't think that 4 stars and 5 stars make a difference, just look at the offensive lines at Alabama and Notre Dame and Clemson. I mean, I saw some of the ones that from Alabama when they came out here during the Pete Carroll type of deal. I mean, I saw Alex Leatherwood. I mean, he was a stud. He's going to be a #1 draft pick. He looked like he was 24 years old already when he was 18. I mean, that's the type of player you get. You look at the Notre Dame offensive linemen, they're all studs. And they reload. They don't rebuild. And if you're going to get to the national level, you have to have that type of athlete in your toolbox. I hate to use that word, but you need it because this is where the games are still won. No matter what decade, what generation, it's blocking and tackling. And until I can see SC really getting 2 years in a row of elite linemen, but in order to do that, you have to be impressive when kids watch you on TV and that sort of stuff, especially in a COVID environment. So we'll see. I mean, I'm intrigued by some of the offensive linemen that they have. I mean, the kid from Texas,
Ty Buchanan.
Yeah, I was intrigued because generally you get tough kids out of Texas. They take their football extremely seriously. And, he's 6'6", 290 already. I watched film of him. He's aggressive. He gets to the second level. I like that. Actually, a player that probably intrigues me the most out of all the offensive linemen is the big kid out of St. John Bosco, Max.
Max Gibbs.
Max Gibbs, yeah. Maximus. That's his name? Yeah.
Yeah.
6'6", 360. Now, didn't we have a lineman that was huge like that? It's several years ago. Ended up making somebody's I've never heard of All-America team. Lincoln Kennedy's son. There's a little hint for you.
Oh, sure. I don't know if Gibbs is a tackle the way Zach Banner was, but certainly the size. I mean, the size. It's a get off the bus first kind of guy that you're talking about down the line there.
Well, the reason I like the potential of Gibbs down the line is that he's 6'6", 360. He started for a powerhouse national team. If he got down to, let's say, 330, 320, and he's a guard, you know what? I think he wants to mix it up. I've seen him on drills and that sort of stuff. He's kind of a baby, big baby, but not in a negative sense. He's got a lot of upside. It's how bad he wants it.
And he moved for that size right now. I think he moved surprisingly well. And the guy that you didn't mention, Mason Murphy, he's my favorite guy in this. I think he has the chance to be a left tackle at USC for multiple years as a starter again down the line. So we'll see. It's another kind of developmental class. We thought last year's class was developmental, and they've got two guys that have already played, significantly against Washington State as true freshmen. The rest of the offensive class, I'm curious kind of who stands out to you. You've got a running back and then a couple tight ends, big tight ends, Y bodies. Clay Helton called them the kind of Drake London role and some of that pass catching tight end. And then 3 wide receivers that are committed right now in a local guy in Kyron Ware Hudson, and then Joseph Manjack, a late commitment from Texas, and then Nevada's Michael Jackson the third, and all there's a lot of kind of intriguing guys in there. It's again not a lot of 5-star elite guys, but some of these guys I think can play a little bit. I'm curious who kind of pops out to you.
Well, obviously, Kyron Ware Hudson pops out because he's kind of the established stud. But I tell you what, Michael Trigg in high pointing the ball on passes is going to be just terrific. He's a tremendous athlete, 6'5", 230, out of Tampa, Florida, where USC got Michael Williams from. I found him very impressive. One guy that I thought was kind of like, whoa, this guy actually looks good on film was Joseph Manjack, the fourth, 6'4", 200. I watched video of him a couple of times. He's from Tomball, Texas. And I said, you know what? This guy might be a real sleeper. He could be a real sleeper because the film doesn't lie. Just because somebody isn't a 5-star right away or 4-star, guys can play. They can play. A lot of guys you think can play can't play when the lights are on and the TV cameras are there. They freeze up. But it seemed to me that Manjack is really a feisty type of player, and I liked what I saw actually.
Those names jump out to me too. Michael Trigg, I think, has just enormous upside. We've seen what Drake London can do in this offense. Trigg is I think a wider body, looks more like a traditional tight end, but he's a wide receiver. He's split out wide in high school. He goes up, he goes downfield and catches the ball. I think he has just tremendous upside in this. Brandon Campbell, I think at running back, he's an interesting guy to me. The USC did not sign a running back in the 2020 class. They kind of finished off the recruitment of Keenan Christensen. So this is the first guy that this staff has gone out, targeted, and gotten. He had a lot of big time offers, a lot of schools coming after him. He's stuck with USC. And I you and I both kind of have the same feeling about USC's running game right now, where it's just sort of, all right, we'll see what we can get out of there. But this is a guy that they really targeted early, and he bought into kind of how he fits in the offense and signed up for what he's seen so far this year. So I'm really curious about how they use him, how that works out, and how he fits in. And there might be a quick opportunity for him, depending on what those seniors, Vavai Malapai and Stephen Carr, do at the end of this season. Obviously, the NCAA has made it allowable for them to return another year, but if they don't, all of a sudden you've got just 2 scholarship running backs in Marquis Stepp and Keenan Christensen there, and there's a space wide open. He's another guy who's a spring enrollee. A ton of guys in this class coming in the spring, so he'll have a chance to go. He's a guy that I'm kind of curious to watch how he fits in and how this staff actually wants to use a running back now that they've kind of got a guy that they handpicked. For this.
Remember, he averaged 7.6 yards per carry. Okay, he had 18 touchdowns, but what caught my eye is that he averaged 20 yards per pass reception. Okay, so he's a guy that maybe, like you said, for his size, about 5'10", 200, somewhere in there, could fit the bill. Now, of course, I'm not shocked about the running back situation because it's almost an afterthought of an afterthought. But Campbell is trusting what he's hearing, that he'll be used. He'll come in the spring. We don't know how many players are going to leave SC. And what we don't know, which is the big wild card, is the NCAA is granting all these players another year of eligibility. So who's actually going to leave and who's actually going to stay could be a real juggling act. But I think Campbell probably made the right move for him. He's the only one. So that's always a good sign if you're a player going, there's nobody but me.
The only one for 2 years now. Again, they didn't take a guy in 2020 in the 2020 class. So he's got some room there to work on that depth chart. Defensively, I'm just going to open it up the entire defense. That they've signed a bunch of defensive backs. just one linebacker at this point, and then a few guys on that defensive line. Who's a guy defensively that jumps out to you, or really with the effort that the staff kind of put in defensively?
Well, the guy that jumps out to me is Julian Simon from Tacoma, Washington. He's a man. He could play a number of positions, and I see him getting a big opportunity to play linebacker. You know, if he's 220 coming out of high school, he'll be 235, which is big enough for an inside linebacker. And he seems to be smart. He was committed to SC. How he got out of Washington, I have no idea, but I can guarantee you they lost a player there, which is interesting because Jimmy Lake, head coach of Washington, he's a former defensive coordinator. So how do you lose that one? But no, I think the Trojans loaded up on certain positions, on the team. I maybe I'm jumping the gun here a little bit, but the guy who I also found is intriguing is the transfer Ishmael Sofer from Alabama. One thing I know, regardless of his situation, he was good enough to get a scholarship from Alabama. Maybe it didn't work out for him. Maybe he got down on himself. Who knows? But I think that he's somebody that will catch the attention of USC.
Yeah,
Excuse me.
so Sumter coming out from Alabama, that's one of those guys. If you can get a kid from the Southeast who's just willing to line up at defensive tackle for you, you roll the dice on him. I mean, and he's a kid who he was a top 50 prospect coming out as a recruit. He's a guy who a lot of people thought could play. He dropped some weight between his first and second year at Alabama, and you assume coming out here, chip on his shoulder maybe a little bit, trying to prove some people wrong. I think he's a guy who's experienced the SEC, experienced kind of the Alabama weight room culture, that whole thing, and I think he could bring a lot to that USC defensive line. Julian Simon is the guy for me defensively, and it was no surprise to me when Clay Helton says he's got captain intangibles in him. This is a guy you can tell he's from a football family. His older brother plays at Colorado, and he just kind of soaks it in. He doesn't play the same position as Talanoa Hufanga, but he feels like that. Just a guy who, if you set him down anywhere on the field, he'll make the tackle on that play. He'll pull off an interception. He'll force a fumble. He'll do something good for your team around the ball. And this is a guy who could play. I think he could play inside linebacker. He could play outside linebacker. He could play any of the safety spots. He could play wide receiver for you if you wanted him to, and probably running back as well. He's that kind of player. And I expect big things. And from the way the coaching staff just sort of reacted when he committed, reacted when he signed, you can tell they see some big things coming from him. And I think he gives them kind of a lot of versatility. And again, he's got to do it. He's the only linebacker in this class so far. And so he's going to have a lot of responsibility because USC has been sort of decimated at inside linebacker by injuries this year. And, who knows what that means for next year. But again, should be a lot of opportunities for him to play early. And then you move to the defensive backfield, and it's two corners and three safeties. All three safeties, that's Anthony Beavers, Kalen Bullock, and Zamarian Gordon. They're all coming in the spring. And so if USC does lose Talanoa Hufanga, and then Isaiah Polamau is, again, you start preparing for transitioning without those guys. I think getting those three safeties in should be fascinating because you look at that defensive backfield, and I think the coaches like what they have right now. But based on rotations this year and what we've seen, I don't know how much trust there is in a lot of those young guys. So this group might be able to come in and really push to get on that two deep fairly early, I think, in their careers.
Well, I think it gets down to the word compete. And remember, you got a corner coach in Dante Williams and Craig Navarre doing safeties. So it's not like, somebody's going to have to split all four positions, so to speak. I think that's going to work to the benefit of all the players. And plus, there'll be even more competition now. And that's always a good thing.
And then you mentioned it right off the top. This class is incomplete. You can't grade the class right now. They've got right now 3 of the top 8 players in California are unsigned. One of them, linebacker Rajon Davis, is committed to LSU. He said he's going to wait all the way until the February signing period. Sierra Wright, the cornerback from Loyola, is the number 8 recruit in the state, and then Corey Foreman, the outside linebacker defensive end from Corona Centennial, he's the number 1 overall recruit in the country. He is down to Arizona. He has Clemson, Georgia, LSU, and USC in there. A lot of, at this point, good feelings, I think, for USC, for maybe all 3 of those guys. That changes the dynamic of this class. That is 3 elite defensive players, 1 at each level. And I think that makes forget about kind of the talent for a second, although that's a big deal. That makes a major statement for this defensive staff in the state of California, in Southern California, in the entire West region. And I think that kind of sends shockwaves through that 2022 class and really kickstarts them to the future, something they weren't able to do with the 2019, 2020. Some elite local guys weren't able to seal the deal with them. They have a real chance with these guys, and I think that's big.
Absolutely.
So I mean, at this point, what do you see for Foreman, Davis, Sierra Wright? Are they coming to USC?
Yes.
Easy as that.
I'm saying I had no hesitation.
Yeah,
Depending on who you want to listen to, Foreman says he wants to wait till Jan 2nd for the All-America Bowl. How do we even know there's going to be an All-America Bowl on January?
Well, there's no bowl. They changed it just to a kind of commitment ceremony for the guys who wanted to commit during the game. So that'll be the commitment ceremony. Both Corey Foreman and Sierra Wright announcing their commitments January 2nd. Corey Foreman said he signed today. Well, his plan coming into Wednesday was to sign there, hold off on his announcement. Those are always dicey. Usually guys can pull that off and keep it quiet all the way there. We'll see if that's the case for him, but whoever lands him, it's a major celebration. I think USC, with Drake Jackson being there, and you've seen a lot of that kind of 2 outside linebacker look with Drake Jackson and Hunter Echols, and that's maybe the pitch where you can get Corey Foreman and Drake Jackson on the field at the same time, that they being former teammates and good friends. And so again, that for me finishes off this class. If they get those 3 guys, I think, again, whatever was announced today, you kind of put that on pause, and then you wait and see what happens in February, because still a handful of spots left for USC to fill out in this class. And I think, again, we're talking about this being a good class. I'm comfortable bumping that up to a great class, depending on how they end with those last few spots.
Well, I guess we can all decide which adjective we would use if all 3 of them did go. But it's the message that it's sent in Southern California. Foreman, Davis, Wright, they're all Southern California kids. There is no way that SC should ever lose those type of kids. And so you ask yourself, well, what will Friday night's game against Oregon, what will that mean? Okay. And what happens if SC goes and they beat Oregon and they play in the Fiesta Bowl and they play, let's just say Georgia, okay? And they compete against Georgia. Let's just say, on a positive note, they beat Georgia. The amount of credibility will be enormous. And by the way, Fiesta Bowl is January 2nd. I believe that's the same date as Foreman's supposed to make his announcement. So that could be interesting. But I hope from a, obviously a prejudice standpoint, that SC does beat Oregon, because that would certainly mean Pac-12 champions. And you know what? Then, okay, play against Indiana in the Fiesta Bowl, or play, Georgia. All these kids are going to look at is they won the championship. It's okay to go there. And I think right now, given last year's debacle, embarrassment, if you will, this is a real credibility possibility for Clay Helton, not only for his team, but for himself as well.
Yeah, I think after last year, you have to look at this as a huge step forward. Again, we talked about kind of some positions where, okay, we'll look at the 2022 class and see if you can pick it up a little bit there. But overall, a very positive day for USC, and there is that ellipses at the end of it, that potential to be continued with this class, and as they go into, again, January 2nd, and then also that first Wednesday in February, with a chance to add more guys. But for now, that's kind of our look at the 20 new additions that USC announced on that first day of the early signing period. So for Greg Katz, this is Erik McKinney. Thanks for watching WeAreSC.